Hello everyone, today we will take a look at destructuring in JavaScript. So, what is it? Well, destructuring is a powerful feature that lets you unpack values from arrays or objects into individual variables. Let's say we have an array and we want to assign each value to its own variable. One way to do this is to manually declare each variable and assign the corresponding element from the array. First value to the first variable, second to the second, and so on. But with the help of destructuring, you can do all of it with a single line of code. Its syntax is very similar to assignment, just other way around. It performs the reverse operation of an array declaration by declaring each element in a collection as a separate variable. As you can see, it works. And by the way, you are not forced to use all values. You can skip elements if they are not needed by typing single comma. If you want to grab just the first values and group everything else into a separate array, you can use rest operator. By the way, the variable itself doesn't have to be called rest. You can give it any name you like. You can also include default values in your destructuring. They are used when the property is not present or has value undefined. For example, here, if I have an array with just 3 elements but will use 4 variables, the last variable will try to reference the first element of the array, which doesn't exist, so it will end up undefined. But if I say the default value of this variable is 0, then this value will be printed out instead. It's also worth mentioning that here all this time we were using so-called binding syntax, where you declare new variables by using const or let and assign values from an array or object at the same time. But there is also assignment syntax where variables are declared beforehand and then you use them in destructuring. In this case, you don't need const or let keyword. Okay, now when we know how array destructuring works, let's take a look at objects. But before we do, here's one interesting fact. Did you know that by using array destructuring, you can swap values like a chat using only one line of code? Let's say that we have two values, a and b. So if you want to swap their values, you create an additional temp variable, you store original value of a there, then you say that a equals b, and finally b equals temp. But here's the alternative where you need just one line of code. Here we basically say, hey, on the right, we have an array where first element is b and second element is a. So take this array, put value of the first element in variable a and value of the second element in variable b. Okay, so with that being said, let's take a look at objects. Let's imagine that we have a user object with some ID and name. We can easily extract this information and put it in the dedicated variables using similar syntax. Here you can notice that names of the variables are the same as object properties. But if you want, you can change it by specifying different name using colon. Object destructuring also supports default values and rest parameter, just like arrays. For example, here we can modify properties of our object by removing the ID and adding some extra information. Now we will see that ID is 0 since it was not found and default value was used instead. Name got printed, and the rest variable contains all of the remaining properties. Okay, so now when we know how destructuring works, let's see where we can use it. It is particularly useful when working with functions. For example, if you have a function that works with user object but really needs only one of its properties, you can use destructuring syntax directly in place of the parameter. As you can see, works as expected. It can also be used to unpack values returned by a function. A classic example of that is React useStateHook, which returns current state value and a function to update that state in a form of array. It is usually unpacked into separate variables for clarity and ease of use. Well, with that being said, I think we have covered the most important things you need to know about destructuring in JavaScript. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a comment, and of course subscribe for more. Bye!